All right, welcome back. I'm Jesse Nelson.
Edwin Jones.
We are here at Lenore City Church of Christ with our daily Bible reading. And we are at Malachi chapter 4.
That's somewhat of a momentous place to be, isn't it?
Yeah. We are ending our Old Testament discussion. I know we kind of started when Haggai or wherever we started. But if you've been here all year, we've been going through the Old Testament Sunday night classes. I know we didn't start our daily Bible reading right away, but we're going to do the whole New Testament.
Wow.
Starting next Monday. And if you want a copy of that schedule, if you're not a member and you didn't get the email, comment below, and I'll try to private message you a PDF if you want to try to keep up with that.
By the way, if you have any questions along the way with anything we're doing, we may not be able to get to it when we're live, but if you would just ask them, we'll find a way at some point to answer them.
Yeah, and Israel Jones happens to be listening live.
Israel?
He's listening.
Oh, man.
And he will feed your comments and try to text me. If I see it, then we'll see it. So anyway, we are in Malachi chapter 4, and if you have been following along, Malachi being probably the last book in the Bible, it's the last book in your Bibles if you're reading a modern-day English translation. And it serves as a good end cap. And the last couple of verses here is really going to serve as a good, there's these summary statements you find in the Bible.
If this is the last book that was written, you can see God's providentially putting that in there because this is a good cap. This is a good place to get ready for the new.
Very good end cap. And so these 6 verses, though short, pack a punch of really the essence of what God has always desired all the way back to Genesis chapter 1 of his people.
It's like a hello.
Yeah. So we are, I guess since it's only 6 verses, I'll read the first 3 and you can read the next 3.
Sounds reasonable.
All right, so I think this is a continuation of the chapter 3, the great day of the Lord, where this messenger is coming.
That chapter and verse stuff, not always right.
No. So, for behold, the day is coming, burning like an oven. So Hansel and Gretel.
You know, immediately comes to mind.
You know, burning like an oven, when all the arrogant and evildoers will be stubble.
Now, so when we start back up with the New Testament, and we've got John the Baptizer, he starts talking like this.
Yeah, and this burning like stubble, this evildoers, this arrogant, God, I mean, when you look at the things that God hates, every sin really starts with a pride issue.
It does.
Because if you're prideful enough to go against the law of God, thinking you know more than God.
The sky's the limit.
The sky's the limit. And that's kind of been the definition of sin, is really defining good and evil for yourself.
The garden.
Yeah.
Satan with Eve. Hey, how'd you like to be God?
Yeah. How would you like to know what God knows? And if you know what God knows, then you can determine.
Yeah, you could call the shots. You don't have to listen to him.
You write the law.
He's trying to keep stuff from you.
Whenever man writes the law, it fails.
It does.
Even in our wisdom, you know, you look at 1 Corinthians chapter 1 where Paul talks about the wisdom of God versus the wisdom of man. If I were to write this story, I'd write it a whole lot differently.
Of course. You know, I was mentioning just the other day, if we had, it was last night, if we had an apostle finding committee, we would have never even given the time of day to the apostles.
No, we'd pick definitely different people. Me, of course, being one of them.
Of course.
That's probably why.
I'd pick you as well.
You know, that's probably why I wasn't chosen. But, so the day is coming. That the day that is coming shall set them ablaze, says the Lord of hosts, so that it will leave them neither root nor branch.
John again acts at the root.
Yeah, and what he's trying to do is cut off from this perpetuating itself.
Yes.
And in the kingdom,
prune, if you will.
And a lot of times we look at these and we think, well, evil's still in the world. Well, God is really focused on his kingdom that he's establishing.
Yes.
And sometimes that's talked about in cosmic, world epic type things, but really this kingdom is supposed to envelop the whole world. So you're kind of going back and forth, but really in the kingdom, right? And that's what Jesus is focusing on.
And there are outposts everywhere.
Yeah. But the kingdom ought to be purified first before the world can be purified.
Yes. You got Jesus in John 15 with the vine and the branches. That's just what has to happen. If we're in the way, if we're causing a problem to the vine, then we need to be pruned off so the vine can do what it needs to do. And
then ultimately, this carries over into eternity, because when you get into like Revelation, the eternal kingdom, where there won't even be them in the world, not just in the kingdom, but not even in the world, right? So, all right, so But for you who fear my name, and once again, we've talked about
There it
fear quite a
is.
bit, awe, respect, reverence, all those kinds of things are built into that, not just this terrifying
No.
aspect. Though,
There's that part, but it's respect,
well, it's like
appreciation.
you brought up the fact yesterday or the other day, maybe yesterday, about a father.
Yeah.
A father needs to have that effect that if I go against the wishes of my
It
dad,
won't go well.
it's not going to go well. But if I'm living according to the way my father wants me to live, then I have no need to fear my
And
dad.
my Father will be patient with me
Yeah.
until I wear His patience out, which God gets His patience.
And
worn
God's
out
a
as
better
well.
father than we are.
Oh, yes.
Sermon on the Mount, right?
that's
If your
for sure.
father's is not nowhere near as good as us, know how to give good gifts.
Exactly.
How can I? All right. So, you fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall rise.
And notice it's S-U-N.
Yes, shall rise with healing in its wings. And so there's this idea of light and righteousness being built together. It's going to rise, healing in its wings. I think there's a play on, Jesus being not the
Prologue of John. There
Son.
you go.
Yeah, he's the light. He's the Son, S-O-N, but he's also the Son,
Son.
the S-U-N. He's the
Yes,
light of the
He
world.
dispels darkness.
Yep, yeah. He says, you shall go out leaping like calves from the stall. You shall tread down the wicked, for they will be ashes under the soles of your feet on the day when I act, says the Lord of hosts. So once again, there's this distinguishing at the end of chapter 3. There's going to be this, you will know who's wicked. You will know who's righteous. God will make those determinations. The hearts will be revealed.
A very graphic way early
Yeah.
on was destruction of Jerusalem.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when you think about the first century climate, and before Jesus, if people were to explain what a righteous man looks like, they would probably pick Pharisees, Sadducees,
Oh, yeah,
Sanhedrin.
look at those guys. They
you
got that
know,
list.
Scribes.
Yeah.
They're the people who
They didn't
know.
necessarily like those people, but
Well,
they thought
no.
they were the ones who had it down.
And then Jesus comes along and exposes the reality that that's not what righteousness looks like.
No.
Let me show you what it looks like.
And we can fall into the same trap today.
Yeah. So
False definition of righteousness.
So that will be dispelled. You will no longer, as Ephesians 4 says, be tossed here and there. The mystery will be revealed. You will now know. You won't have to rely upon someone else telling you.
You
We'll
can
all
stand
have.
your ground
Yeah.
in the Lord.
Yeah.
And healing in His wings. Jesus, one of the more iconic statements is, come unto me, all you who labor and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. That's sort of another way of saying, I will heal you of
Yeah.
all your labors and all the things you got when you try to do it your way. Just come and walk with me.
And the fact that Jesus, before the destruction of Jerusalem, says, "Oh, Israel, Israel, oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I tried to gather you in my
Yeah.
wings." It's not that Jesus wanted to dispel Israel or dismiss Israel. In fact, He loves Israel, as we're learning in Malachi. He has loved. God has always loved Israel, and He tried to gather.
Yes, even when it got tough, so to speak, it wasn't just to be getting tough because He was mad. He was wanting them to, please pay attention.
Yeah. So
You got skipping about like calves in the stall too. And I think of Habakkuk
Yep.
when he'd be like a mountain antelope that's skipping about on the rocks, just having
Yeah.
himself a time.
He's having herself time. Joy, peace, all that kind of stuff. You're not having to fear wolves and enemies and all those kinds of things. So verse 4, that's it on you.
Remember the law of Moses. There we go. My servant, even the statutes and ordinances which I commanded him in Horeb for all Israel. And that extends to the Torah as the first 5 books, but it also in many ways extends to the whole of the revelation of the Old Testament, because after you get the first 5 books, mainly you kind of got commentary and what spills off of that and how you enforce it and all that kind of stuff. But that remains the document. And Torah, we often translate that, well, we've just done it, haven't we? The law of Moses.
Yeah.
That's not a good translation. It comes from a word that, like if you threw a rock or shot an arrow, it meant teaching, because if you're a teacher, you're shooting teaching towards somebody.
Yeah.
But this is the instruction or teaching of Moses. That, to our English ears, I think sounds more like what it ought to sound like.
Now, usually, okay, so let's stop at this for a second. Usually when people talk about law in today's world, it always comes off in the negative. We're not saved by law.
Do this, don't do that. Poop.
Well, and even in the theological sense, we're not saved by law.
Yeah.
God's law is being put away. God's law is being all these kinds of things. And yet, instruction is just the fact that though you may not be saved by perfect law keeping, that does not mean that the law, the instructions, the teachings are void or useless. that they don't give guidance, that they're not good. These people who are fearing God realize that this law, this instruction, is not just coming from Moses, but who did Moses get this from?
And it's for their benefit. It's
Yeah.
for their good. It's like Paul, when he's talking about all this, some people are going to think, well, you're doing away with the law. He says, does faith do away with the law? And he says, no.
No, he upholds it.
That's what puts it where it's supposed to be.
But faith saves, but a person who understands, who has a faith and trust in God, will look to his law as this is what faith looks like.
If you trust another person when they talk,
Yeah.
you trust what they say.
And a lot of times, unfortunately, we don't look at the Bible as God speaking to us. It's
Right.
more of a
detached distance,
like a
off
lawyer
there somewhere.
book. You know,
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
looking to analyze it too.
Yeah,
And really,
yeah.
it's just, hey, be a good person, love your neighbor, love God.
Oh, the summation statements all through the Bible talk, essentially say, be a good person and walk with God.
Yeah. So remember that. All right.
Okay, behold, I'm going to send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and terrible day of the Lord. That great and terrible day of the Lord is something that gets a lot of play in the prophets. He will restore the hearts of the fathers to their children, the hearts of the children to their fathers, so that I will not come and smite them with a curse. So, first of all, this Elijah figure. Last night I had a reason to mention that as I was talking about the ministry of John the Baptizer, who Jesus says, if you care to accept it, is Elijah. So in English, I was taught that metaphorical language, you have similes, like, as, and you have metaphors, which just states it as if it were the case.
Yeah.
Like, this could have said, I'm going to send you one like Elijah.
Yeah.
And that's the point.
Yeah. And interesting thing enough, this Elijah, Moses, Zechariah, remember he was focused on Joshua and Zerubbabel as being Christ figures.
Yeah, the Levites or the priests and the kings.
And so this is not something new,
No.
where they're using these Old Testament figures who are important in Israel's story to represent someone who's coming later, who's going to do something even greater.
Archetypical, if you will.
And then it's interesting that we have up on the Mount of Transfiguration both Elijah and Moses up there, and Peter's looking to build an altar to altar, and all of a sudden they're gone. And this is my son. Right. So the main player in all of this really ultimately becomes Christ.
Yeah, John the Baptizer is Elijah, and
Pointing towards
Jesus. What does he say, John? I must decrease, but he must increase.
So in his job, interesting, Elijah's was turn the hearts of the fathers and children, the hearts to their fathers. And that's really what John's baptism was about, was turning people back to God and being ready for the Messiah who's coming.
He just wanted to get an intergenerational messianic expectation and acceptance.
Yeah. So, lest I come, I mean lest I,
That's in the background. I mean, we don't want to deal with that, but we have to acknowledge that it's there.
And I think we see God's heart here in his desire. His desire is for salvation. But if people don't want it and they openly reject it and continue to reject it, what's their ultimate fate? Now, interestingly enough, they're already on that road. Like they're already on God doesn't send people to destruction.
No.
They're on the road to destruction.
You get the consequences of your choices.
Yes, and God allows you to walk that way. He has sent things along the way to try to get you off that road and onto the better road and on a road that leads to salvation. But if you reject it,
the Broadway gets a lot of attention.
And as Jesus tells Israel in John, he says, your father is not God, your father is Satan. Why? Because you live like him, talk like him, act like him.
You're on his road.
You have his traits, and if you have his traits, you go where he's going.
Is it time for a Ben-Hur illustration?
Do it.
Okay, then. You folks familiar with Ben-Hur, maybe the Charlton Heston epic. I don't know. Maybe you read the novel. Watch the movie. It's a lot easier to follow. This guy, Arius, he's the commander of a Roman fleet, and Ben-Hur as a galley slave saves his life. And because he's seen the character of this man, he wants a son to carry on after him that has character and integrity. Ben-Hur is the guy of Judah, and so he adopts him.
Yeah.
And God's looking for people who will carry on his ways, people who will be sympathetic to what he stands for and will uphold it, and he will adopt us.
Yeah. And this, interestingly enough, this turn their hearts is a promise God has always has always given, all the way back to Deuteronomy,
Yes.
is the fact that I will make, so sometimes we say, a new heart.
A new heart.
Circumcise your heart.
Yeah,
Cleanse
yeah,
your heart.
yeah.
It's all the same.
All the same.
You know. And so the summary of the end of the conclusion of the Old Testament is God is sending someone, a kingdom is coming, where all these promises that Moses gave, that should have been Israel's, could have been Israel's in a sense, is going to be fulfilled in the Messianic age.
And heart is the key.
Yeah,
Heart is the key. Sometimes heart is used in relationship to other things, heart, soul, mind, and strength. Sometimes it's used as a catch-all for everything that we are, our essence, who we are, and that's what we've got here. That's where God's going to look. That's where we can do outward things.
Yeah.
If our heart's not with them, they don't count. Where's our heart? Yeah, heart has to act. Heart has to do something, but it will.
Yeah.
Jesus said, "If you love me, you'll keep my commandments."
Well, even Paul, when he's talking to the Jews who thought they had the monopoly on the law, said, hey, there are Gentiles who don't even have the law but keep principles of the law. Their hearts.
They're better than you guys.
Yeah, their hearts have a circumcision of the heart, and that's always been what God has really wanted, and it's found in the Torah. Physical circumcision was always to be a symbol of what should be going on in the heart, and unfortunately, they took that physical sign further than what was supposed to be going on internally.
Without getting particularly graphic, you go to Galatians and read it for yourself.
Yeah,
Paul
cut it
gets-
all off.
yeah. Just finish the job. I wasn't going to say that, but alas, it's on the table now. So I
it's in the
embrace
Bible.
It. It is.
That's the thing. It's in the
biblical.
Bible. I'm not going to be scared
And
of
that's
you.
just how he was just put off by that emphasis on outward things. That's not where it's at. Yeah, there'll be outward things, but if they don't come from the heart, then they're not any good.
Dare I say
Oh,
that
you probably would.
Dare I say that we use baptism in a very similar, only outward. I've done it.
No, I'm
I've done in the water.
Yeah.
in
Remain
that-
faithful unto death, whatever that means. Who
But
knows?
nothing's changed in here.
Yeah.
Baptism means nothing
No.
if you have not had your heart circumcised.
Baptism is a consequence of a decision you've made about Jesus and a
Yeah.
purpose you've made to be his disciple. If it's not that, it's just getting wet.
So that's Malachi.
There you go.
Malachi, the Italian.
Malachi, the Italian prophet.
An Italian prophet. So there's your Old Testament. I mean, that's a pretty good conclusion of what God desires. Remember the law, remember my instruction, turn your hearts to me.
How could you say it any better?
That's a love God, because the law comes from who? God.
God.
Turn your hearts, love your neighbor, become more like me, express that to the world around.
If you love God, love what he says. Well, you will.
Yeah. Jesus says, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. Here we are. All right, well, there's our Old Testament.
Yes, it is. It's
Monday,
almost
we
New Testament.
start Matthew chapter 1. A genealogy may seem boring to you, but has a whole lot of nuances in there.
There's stuff in there.
There's stuff in there that's really good, and it tells the overall story.
You can also watch and see how well we pronounce the names.
I'll let you read. All right, love you guys. God